So, welcome to the Rise of the Super Being podcast. I'm Wanderson Pires, our producer at Scalan Walk, and today our guest, a very special guest, is Fiona Lovatt. So, Fiona, it's the New Zealand poet and teacher based in Kano, north of Nigeria. She's founded Books Without Borders. It's a project that helps supplies books to 190 libraries across Nigeria. So she has moved to Nigeria in 2010 to train community teachers, and she founded the Lovatt Foundation. She has been helping to protect the most vulnerable people on this planet. So Fiona, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I've been here lots of stories about you from your daughter Samira, Blake, and of course Scarlett.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing. So you've been teaching for over 30 years now, right?
Yeah, my first years as a trained teacher, 1982 I began. And by the end of that decade, I was a primary school principal. I went on and did a lot of teacher training, teacher education within schools. I've always used my teaching practice as an opportunity to explore the boundaries of what education can do to emancipate a child and to transform a society, because if you can teach a child to read and you engineer the flight out of poverty for the children of the poor, they are going to come up with radical solutions to problems because they already know what the problems are. And it's just, it's been a wonderful thing to work in that area in New Zealand and then to reach middle age and think, okay, I've made my contribution here. A lot of things like landscaping for learning are part of the school program. Non-violent schools, peaceful relationships, they are normal now. Where I began teaching while we were still strapping children, and I fought against it, you know. I had an integrated curriculum and children on individualized programs and lots of freedom and glory. You know, lots of integrated arts and, you know, just brilliant, wonderful times that I had with children in New Zealand schools. And then we manifested it in schools, school-wide once I was a principal. And now I get this opportunity to be amongst the poorest of the poor. I'm with the people who are $1 a day or less. You know, you see the advertisements on television for like, give it to little so-and-so who lives in such and such. And you think, how can anyone live on $1 a day?
Wow.
And for myself, when I'm living there, it doesn't cost me anything more than $20 a week, and that includes my flight home to New Zealand annually, you know. You know, so, and what I like about where I'm living, even though we're regarded as a red zone, which means, you know, Westerners shouldn't be there for more than 72 hours, and they should have a bodyguard, and they should, you know, like get out of there as fast as possible. I'm living there. I like the idea that my carbon footprint, apart from that flight to New Zealand, is practically zero. Like, I'm not producing any waste in a week. I don't have a rubbish bin to put out. I either compost it or I burn it. I don't buy it if it's going to make rubbish. I don't actually even go shopping. I love not shopping. I love not having to think about money. I love not having to think about, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? There's nothing as trivial as that in my mind.
The less you earn, the more freedom you have, right?
Yeah. And what comes out of the garden, and you have a garden growing in the Sahara Desert because you've got an aquifer that can feed it. You know, you think today we've got a cucumber, so that's what we're having for dinner. You know, or if we've still got some yams, we'll have them for dinner. But it's not like the food is something we do to honor our body. Our body has a right to nutrition and to being fed, but it's not the focus of the day. And if we can gather in groups of people and we're only drinking water with each other because the point is a communion of souls or a celebration of a good spirit or a desire to know something and to learn something, or to dance or to sing together or to pray together. You know, to share something of what we have with something of what you've got, rather than a whole kind of chat kind of way of living.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So Fiona, before we get more deeper with your story, I just would like to make a comment about the importance of it's something I believe it's something very powerful. It's the highest level of the act of kindness, being a volunteer. So just a few facts for the people who it's listen or watching us right now and get inspired through your story. So some facts about being a volunteer. So volunteer can help with manage levels of stress, anger, and anxiety, because the social contact aspect of helping in working with others can have a profound effect on your overall physical well-being, because you're helping other people and you engage with the problems of your community. So volunteers make you happier. Why? Because by research is showing that discovered that being helpful to others delivering massive amount of pleasure. Also helps you combat depression as well, because volunteering keep you constantly in contact with others, what help you to develop a community who supports each other. What's a beautiful thing, right? Volunteer also increases self-confidence, because when you're doing good for others and your community, provides a natural sense of accomplishment. Also, volunteering provides you a sense of a purpose. And they showed this study with all the adults, especially those ones who lost their loved ones. So when they engage with communities, help them to live longer and also make them healthier as well, because the act of being a volunteer make you constantly being physically active. Is that right?
And I think, like, even the word we have for volunteer in the West actually, it has that idea of there's employment, which you do to earn your living, and then you volunteer, which is your reason for living.
Oh,
And
that's
why
beautiful.
do we cut it in half? Why isn't your job the thing you love, the thing that you're prepared to give? What volunteer means in the West is you are participating in your community, instead of just drawing out of them the wealth you need to sustain yourself and live your lifestyle. What you're now doing is participating. You're in a symbiotic relationship now with your community, and you confront things that you wouldn't in your working life because you don't want to earn your living, perhaps in that way. Or you don't believe you can earn your living in that way, or you think you need more money than you actually need. Where I'm living, I find that people at the bottom of the economic state are participating with their communities all the time. So there can actually be a level of better mental health because no one has the luxury of being depressed. You don't have the luxury to lie in bed for 3 days and call in sick, because if you're not getting out of bed, you're not eating today. If you can't get yourself to the door of your plastic tent and sit in the sunshine and say good morning to a few people, and the greeting is always peace be with you and also with you. You know, who can say good morning to people who've lost their home, people who are newly raped, people who are newly maimed? You can't say good morning, but you can say peace. Peace be with you and also with you. So the participation with the community, as you've said, you've called it volunteering there, but if we say community interaction, and that can also be economic. One of the things that I've been doing is a project we call Rumbu, based on the local word, Hausa word, for a granary, where at the end of a harvest, at the end of a season, you harvest it and you put all your grain into a storehouse. And from that storehouse, the rough times are coming, and you will scoop out what you need according to what you need. So Rumbu is an economic project where we're giving about $25 to people who live off $1 a day. And what they can do with that $25 is set up a little business, maybe selling some peanut oil or a little bit of soap or maybe a few oranges. But they'll have 100% turnover in a day and make $2.50. Which is 2.5 times what they were living off. So even if they take $2 to live today, they've just doubled their well-being and 50 cents to reinvest in their business. And he come back in a month, and the one who started with the peanut oil is now selling also some palm oil and also frying a few things. And they've grown their business. And their children are looking good in the face, and there's a bit of money now so they can go to school, and they're washing better, they have access to a whole lot more things. The person selling oranges is now selling oranges and bananas, and a month after that, oranges, bananas, watermelons, pawpaw. And he's selling in a community that didn't previously have access to that because they're so far on the periphery of, like I'm in a place where the normal population of Maiduguri is about 1 million, and the population has doubled, and it's in camps of plastic on the periphery of the city. So those people out there don't have access to markets. And by investing in them and allowing them to have their own little markets, even if it's a few items on a tray, or if you've got a wheelbarrow, you're a wealthy person, And now they've got a reason to be getting out of bed. And I'm interested that some women I worked with, they said, we'll be the business people in our family. And I said, well, I know culturally, if I'm giving you the money, I'm emasculating your husband, and he's going to be more of a problem. And they said, don't worry about my husband. There were 2 women who had husbands. They said his heart is a stone now. Isn't that a beautiful expression? Like, my husband's heart is a stone now. They just felt like he's closed off everything to the world. I said I'd like to see him. And I gave the money to the women to go and start their own businesses. And these men who hadn't been out of their beds in a long time were curious to come and see the white woman, the Baturia. And they came. And I said, you really have a responsibility to your family. Like, what gives you the right to lie down?
Wow. Yeah.
You're a man. I'd like you to be a man again. So what could you do? And one of them said, well, I could buy that rice that's got the stones in it. And if I pick the stones out of the rice, I could sell it as good value rice. I said, you're right. Here's your $25. Get started today with 1 sack. So one old man who had shuffled in, like 3 years, I think he'd been in this state of, like, what can I do? What can I do?
Hopeless.
So, like you're saying, I'm the volunteer and it's good for me. My God, it's wonderful to see how people, given a reason to get out of bed, are motivated. And how much they can manage themselves and move on to that. So you see this well-being burst into them. And because, so much of, like in New Zealand, if you're unemployed, it's going to be 2 weeks. Even if you get a job today, it'll be 2 weeks before you get paid. How do you get through those first 2 weeks? How do you even get the money to go to work for those first 2 weeks? How do you get the clothes you need to go to work? Whereas over there, if you want to be a barber, you buy a razor. If you want to be a carpenter, you buy a hammer. You're in business. You can be in business now. Like, I can give you $25 now, and you can be eating dinner tonight in an unregulated society. So that's been a great pleasure doing Rumbu and seeing people lift themselves out of poverty, and that's not even to do with literacy or anything. It's just it's just
amazing.
Just a little capital.
Uh-huh.
So, like, what's it cost you for a brunch here? The $25 for the bruschetta, makes a world of difference to somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I registered Lovatt Foundation, which I felt I had to have an NGO to continue with what I was doing, which is friends out of Nigeria and friends within Nigeria hand me money, and I make sure 100% of it gets to where they want it to go for the purpose they want it to do. And if I don't like what they're suggesting, then, like, if, say, somebody said, sell cigarettes, that'll give me a good return, I say, I'm not doing that job,
Yeah.
We'll need a better project than that. But if they say plant mango trees, I say, yeah, sure, I feel that my NGO is not in the work I'm doing with widows and orphans and displaced people. my job is to help people like me who want to give and who want to assist and want to feel efficacious in the world. I help them to know that this month you fed this child, this one, and you can there are people who are following and watching him through, 5 years, and how did he do in his, how his pumpkin patch is growing and so on. And I don't really do it like matching one-to-one, but you can see the children in this house are growing up to be lovely human beings. One of the things you mentioned was this passion the children have for Tintin books.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is a house now that where the orphans who have been produced by Boko Haram land clearances, really, the banditry and butchery of this bizarre group who have no manifesto. They just kill and disrupt and destabilize society in very random ways. But almost 100% of their attacks are upon the poor. They don't attack airports, they attack markets. They don't attack motorways, they attack alleys. They find the poor wherever they are because there are plenty, but it's very rarely a rich person is bothered by them in any way, shape or form.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. So Fiona, just one, even to give to our audience a little bit of more perspective of who you are. So where are you from and how was your childhood until you discovered this passion for teaching?
I remember being 7 years old here in Wellington and having to leave my family behind, leaving my lovely mother and my lovely father who had great imaginations and all sorts of projects going on. My father always had a project in the weekend we can do. My mother was knitting at night and we'd be carding the wool so she could spin and knit our jerseys. But she was a physio, he was an engineer, they were professional people, but we'd walk all over these hills of Wellington on Sunday afternoons with my father carrying a pack. We'd walk from Mount Koko to Wrights Hill and then down through Wadestown and up the gully and back home. We just loved the wilderness, the creeks and the valleys, the beaches and so on. And had this lovely natural childhood. And then we had to go to school for parts of our lives. And I remember sitting 7 years old in a classroom where a teacher would call out a particular boy in our room. I remember his name to this day, and it seemed like he got strapped in front of us every day.
For which reason?
Just because he was standing up at his desk, or because he had too many books on his desk when he should have had it clean and be sitting like that, or he'd pipe up with something and he shouldn't have said anything, just for being unregimented and uncontained when we were all meant to be orderly. And I realized my 7-year-old self watching this boy being strapped every day, and that we were obliged to be witnesses to it. What kind of terror is that to put into children? We're not sure if we ever will be strapped, but the potential is there. And there's my empathy as a 7-year-old for that boy. And he did this beautiful thing that he'd look at us and say, "Doesn't hurt," and she'd whip him harder. But then he'd smile and walk down rubbing his hand like he was invincible. But I felt for it. And I remember thinking to myself, why did my mother and father send me here? Like, do they even love me? That they would send me to this place where I have to sit every day and watch this. And I thought, when I grow up, when I have children, I will never send them to a place like this. So it was in my mind to train as a teacher so that when I had those children in the future, like even at 16 when I entered Teachers College, I was looking ahead to when I would be a mother and I would be able to homeschool. And I thought the state will never employ me because I'm too radical. But, by teaching with loving kindness, by recognizing every child, like the word genius It comes from the word genes. It comes from the word generation. You know?
Beautiful.
It means you have life in you. It means you have life. We all have life. We all have genius. My job as a teacher was to find out why that kid is perking up and find out who he is so I can fast track him into self-discovery and into a rewarding life. So like I've had a ball teaching from that perspective. And because you're pro-life, the children who think at age 9, I can't read, and somebody will say, we'll put you on a remedial reading program, and you get another 4 years reading the same books you already read before. You know, like, why are you bashing kids around the heads like that? So I would do things like, if that kid's into motorbikes, or he's into hunting, or he's into fishing, and I'm saying all male ones. Yeah, it's interesting how many males miss out in the education system while we're reading about fairies and unicorns, you know, which is really nice if there's a little princess theme going, but you've got to have some stuff for people who are hands-on. And I feel really proud that lots of the kids that I knew didn't have, they didn't care about getting 10 out of 10 on a spelling lesson, but what they did want to do is write bulldozer and, you know, woolshed and really practical things. And I see them like at the top of their, you know, at the top of that, those careers that they already had the inclination for and the love and the passion for. Like if they're working with animals, they're loving the animals. They're not the ones who beat animals with a piece of alkathene. You know, like they are good farmers. They are good ditch diggers. They're the people reclaiming the wetlands. I'm so proud of them. You know, if they're artists, they're doing just magnificent art. And in really healthy ways that are beneficial to the community and a celebration of their own culture and their own values and heritage. And I don't think I've got a pupil behind me out of the thousands that I've taught that I could say, oh God, isn't that sad?
So you started doing that teaching in Wellington, and after, how was the because you can speak Tereo fluent as well, right? You used to.
Well, after 8 years, I think I've forgotten it, but korero ana I te reo Māori. Right?
That's awesome. So after that, so you was teaching here in Wellington for how long before you had this opportunity, and how does opportunity happen to go to Nigeria?
Well, I taught in the Wairarapa. I taught in the far north of New Zealand. I had, I don't know how many, 2004. I sort of, the chronology gets me. I don't even know where we turned the century. But 2001, I was doing lots of things in conferences, educational conferences in New Zealand. And because I was in a low decile school, like working with the lower 20% of socioeconomic indicators, I would go along to conferences, and conferences are really not for that level. You know, conferences are for schools that can afford to send people on conferences. But I was always a presenter, so I'd get a cut rate. And then I would attend other people's speeches and so on. And I think, I want to learn as well, but I'd go along, how do you teach, so you know, how to read? And people say, well, you get the computers. And I thought, we don't have computers. So I thought to myself, I have to go to somewhere where they're poorer than what we have. And when you think of poor, you think of Africa. You know, I'm confronting my own bias and prejudice you know, the stereotypes you carry coming from a place of comfort. And so I applied to attend the second Pan-African Reading Conference in Nigeria. I didn't even really know where Nigeria was. I thought maybe it's near Kenya, maybe, I don't know. But I thought at least if I go to a Pan-African Reading Conference, I'll be able to meet lots of people who have a worse situation than I do. So they accepted me in 2001 as a keynote speaker, and I really got to know the members of the Reading Association of Nigeria, and I got to see they do have it a whole lot worse than we do. I realised what's in my children's bedrooms in terms of books is more than they've got in their schools.
Wow.
So when I came back to New Zealand, this is how Books Without Borders arose. That became sort of I just gave up watching television and I used the computer, thinking I don't have much, but I've got a computer and I've got unlimited internet access, so I'll just invite everyone in New Zealand to give a book, and we'll fill a container and we'll send it to Nigeria. So, and this was in the days of email, it's not social media, it's emails to the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, every church, every school, finding the email addresses, every real estate agent, every insurance company. On and on I went, every vintage car clubs, every trucking company, and I just invited everyone to join me in putting books in. So that was 30,000 kilos of books.
Wow.
Collected within a month.
Whoa.
And that was the first container. So, I mean, that was I got to see this great outpouring and momentum that came from people who said, yeah, I can give a book. Oh, heck, I can give a box full. My own 7-year-old went into her bedroom and she picked out the things that didn't say from Granny and Gramps. Just books that she had as incidental books, not birthday and Christmas books. And she said, you can send these. And I thought, how am I going to send these?
Good question. How
am I
did
going
you
to
manage
send
it? Yeah.
So when 30,000 kilos of books takes some storage space, I thought, what am I going to do to get these from Invercargill and from Bay of Islands and Mount Egmont and, how am I going to move them? So I stayed up all night contacting shipping companies around the world. And then a guy in Belgium said, from Koen-Nagel, he said, if you can fill the container, we'll ship it for free.
Wow.
I said, you're on. You're on. And he gave us a 40-foot container.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I said, can you make it a really old one so that we can make the container part of the gift so they don't need a warehouse on the other side? I said, yeah, okay. So they picked one right at the end of its life, and they even painted it up with Koen-Nagel and Books Without Borders.
Wow, what a cool person.
It was so great.
Wow.
But I can't tell you how many cool people I met through New Zealand. Like thousands of people, and I haven't even met them. I only met them online, and they say, look, here I am in Dunedin and I've got a box. And I'd say, well, there's a truck coming through from Dunedin. Can you get it to the BP station on the North Road? He'd stop and pick it up, and he'd say, well, I'm in Christchurch now. So drop it off at the lady in Ranfurly there. And on things would come until we get to Picton, and then we'd wait for another truck to come through, and he'd load everything into his cab, take it across the Cook Strait. Somebody else was there on the other side to carry it up. I remember going to, not the main airport in Auckland, but a little airport where a farmer, flew his own Cessna aeroplane around the Central Plateau, landing on like school rugby fields and stuff, and the schools would give their old school journals or
Wow, that's amazing. So this was 2001.
2001 that started, and it became an annual thing.
That's amazing.
It was brilliant. And then by 2011 there was this kind of clamoring from the Nigerian side to say, come back, because like the people I'd involved in doing it on the Nigerian side, they'd been feted, they'd been promoted, they were like advisors to governors. They're now in the foreign office of the Nigerian embassy, in London. And they're saying, you have to come back because like this project has been really significant in Nigeria. And I'd always said, no, because the airfare is so expensive. So I thought I was clearing out 4 months of my life to be able to go over and see those 190 libraries. But I thought, I don't just want to tour around like royalty. I have to do something. So I sent my CV to a friend in Nigeria. He said, I think I know an NGO you could work with. And it was a perfect match. It was training community teachers to be able to deliver just literacy, really, in English and in a local language, and to give the children a little bit of social studies and some maths. And that I would train these people who were just literate themselves so that this wider understanding was there. So it was a great job. I worked with over 240 community teachers and trained them.
Wow, unbelievable.
Which was 240 little community schools under trees, with a mat and a blackboard maybe, a box of books.
Wow. So Fiona, how was this transition of leaving everything behind in New Zealand and going for this unknowing new experience. How was that?
Well, when I first arrived there and I saw how flat it is, like a savanna flat. It's flat. And I arrived in the dry season and it's brown. And the Kano was a city of 4 million people, and it seemed like every one of them had a choking, badly operated motorbike, and like the air quality. And there wasn't any weather, it was just a climate. Every day was the same, day after day. And I thought, these are things I don't know if I'll survive, but I thought, I've just chosen 4 months. It's flat, it's brown, I could taste air pollution on my face. And that this is how it is. But it also felt a bit like I was on a camping holiday. So all the things that, like when we're on a camping holiday, you just, you can wash in a bucket. You can eat out of one pot without needing 4 elements on a stove. Maybe you don't have anything in the kitchen, you're just getting what you need day by day. If you've been backpacking, you're not carrying a whole pantry full of food. You get, and you don't know what you're having tonight. What's around, you'll get.
Yeah.
And so there was this feeling of like, I'm really on a long-term camping holiday. And then I'd been there about 6 weeks, and Kano was hit with this massive terrorist attack on a Friday evening, and we're sitting here on a Friday evening.
That was when, 2011?
2012.
12.
Yeah, it was January 2012. Boom, something went off in that direction. You don't hear sirens because there's no there's no services that are going to come with a siren. But then, boom, over there. And then boom over there, and boom over there. And then traffic jams everywhere, and something is dreadfully wrong, and great clouds of smoke.
Where you used to live when this happened?
This, like, in every direction from where I lived, there was some explosion. And they went on for hours. And we were all put under curfew at that time for like 3 days before we could leave our homes. And after those 3 days, I went to the local hospital thinking, I need to give blood. There'll be a need for blood. I don't know what else I can do, but I can give blood. When I went down to the hospital, there was just a sea of people waiting in silence. Like 4 lanes of highway outside the hospital, filled with people. Because there's no infrastructure to find out who's in what hospital and where. How do you know where your loved ones are? There are hospitals all over the city. You're hoping you find bits and pieces. The doctors that I knew at that time put their heads together across that city. And the people who were grave diggers and worked with the mortuaries reckon there were over 1,500 people died at that time. And it got reported as being 500.
Wow. That's massive.
So then it was like, can it be worse than this? And I was in a street, and there's a woman beside me who's got preschoolers. There's 200 people living in my little lane, and they've got little children. And some people left the city. But I thought, my God, look at that. Here are young mothers who are living in this situation. And I thought, if they're here, I'll stay. Like, I've got a ticket out. I've got a ticket to go home if push comes to shove. But at that time, I also thought, like, I had the opportunity working with that NGO. They said, we're clearing everyone out, now that the curfew is lifted, get in the cavalcade. We've got an armed guard. And we're all going south. Get out of here. And I thought, well, no, I don't want to be shot in the back. This is my only thing now, is I don't want to be shot in the back. That gives you a real certain amount of strength. I'm not turning away. And it means that I've confronted a whole lot of things that I wouldn't have thought I could ever have done.
Wow, how powerful is that, Sam?
It's emancipating to think, like, it's been an emancipation of myself. It's been like, it's like finding your wings.
Mm-hmm.
It's finding, like, I love this about an albatross taking flight. An albatross, they have a runway that they share. And what they have to do is feel the current rising up the cliff face because they're on top of the cliff. And they've got to wait in turn. Wait your turn, Vanderson. And then when the moment is right, just lock your wings. That's all you have to do, is lock yourself into the position. And the wind will carry you higher than you imagined.
Wow, I love that.
You know, so like I'm living in a tide of history. I'm living on that flow of hot air that we don't know where this insurgency has come from. We don't know where it's going. But if I can just lock myself into place, I'm going somewhere.
And where does the strength coming from, Fiona?
That's not strength, though. The albatross is not strong. He's not flapping his wings, you know. He's not like, he's just cruising. And it's, part of it is, here's another example.
There's no tension there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't fight it. One of the things that people drown off New Zealand coastline every year because they're trying to fight a rip current. Where if you're caught in a rip, you should just face the sky and relax, just float. Because it will carry you to the end of the rip, which is not too far. And then you can move to the left or to the right, and you can come home on a wave. But if you're fighting it and you're trying to swim against the rip, that's where you lose your energy because I can't stand. You panic, you hyperventilate, you're not getting the oxygen in your blood. Like, we're 67% water. We're going to float on water. In fact, I'm embarrassed now about how buoyant I am. Like, I don't think I can sink anymore. And one of the things we do wrong is we teach children to float face down. That's the way to die. Teach them to float face up. You know, there are things like Oscar Wilde had said, all of us are living in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.
Yeah, I love that.
I love it. And in the war zone, I quite often am sleeping under the stars. And because we're in blackout kind of situation, no electricity and that, I get to see the Milky Way. I get to see constellations I didn't know existed outside of books because we all live with light pollution and accept it. And I get to know the phases of the moon, and I get to know where she'll rise, and, you know, I get to see all of this and feel it and watch birds fly at night and wake up with the dawn, and like that feels a real privilege to me.
That's awesome. So Fiona, what's your daily routine over there in Nigeria?
Well, because we're going to have the hot part of the day, the daily rhythm begins just as the first light is coming into the sky. And mainly because we're a Muslim community as well, so we'll get up and that will be just to have a quick wash and first prayers for the day. From there, like the children, like living in this community of children, they'll be doing their first chores, sweeping the yard and so on. Some people are getting the fires started and cooking breakfast, sorting out their washing and clothing, and maybe by 7 o'clock in the morning, that kind of shift is done. We're waiting for our food. Maybe we'll read for an hour. 8 o'clock, the food will be ready. We can eat. By 9 o'clock, so community teachers are coming in. We'll have some formal lessons. You've been able to look after your animals. You've been able to water your garden a little bit by drawing water out of the well and putting it onto your crops. Collected the eggs, you know, these kind of things. Had a little bath out of a bucket yourself so that you're nice now, your clothes are tidy. Lessons until about 1 o'clock. which is mainly in little study groups, like groups of about 10. The little children are free. The children under 7 years old are just having this lovely childhood in a garden, and it's lovely to hear how they play together in a really harmonious way. The parenting style is not... there's no hothousing of children. There's an absolute belief they're going to grow up to be good people. That there should be fairness and honesty. They'll learn if they've done, like, if you had a knife and you cut yourself, that was a lesson. But we don't have to say, no, like, you don't feed children full of fears.
Yeah, that would be my next question. So what's the main difference did you found of being a teacher in New Zealand and the culture here, the society we live here, compared to this other extreme reality in Nigeria?
The children there know just about everything they need to know to survive in their environment. They know which woods are best for firewood. They know what seeds to plant. They're all great gardeners. They learnt that from their parents and grandparents before I ever met them. They know how to care for animals. They know how to cook food. They know how to wash their clothes. They know all of that. But the oldest children who came to us were 12-year-olds, and we take them as families of children. So if there's a 12-year-old, all their younger siblings are with us as well. These 12-year-olds had never had the opportunity to become literate. And when they found that there was going to be the opportunity to read and write, they were ready. And they've been able to make progress instead of like starting off like they were 5 years old. They've been able to make at least 2 years progress for every year they've been with us in terms of the curriculum. And we've never specifically followed the curriculum. We've just said, here are books, let's read them. Isn't that interesting? How fascinating.
That's so interesting.
So there's nothing about having to motivate children. There's nothing about having to force them. I had a community teacher who was speaking to some children in a maths class, and she said, it's really difficult, but it's worth it. So, the hardship you experience now, it's going to pay off later in life. I had to pull her aside later on and say, these children are doing all the budget for this house and keep the accounts. So, they're really motivated to get their maths right. Because if we can save on something, if we can get a good deal on something, then we've got something for something else. And if someone's shortchanging us and we have to calculate how many yards of cloth we need to dress 55 people, and we're the ones cutting the cloth to make patterns and clothing, and we're the ones who have to double the recipe and cook for 55 people 3 times a day, we've got a lot of maths happening and it's really rewarding. So please don't plant in their head that maths is a problem.
Yes, wow. Great lesson.
And then there were things like these older children. I wanted them to have some really good maths, not just times tables and reciting times tables and just doing numerical operations. So I called in an engineer and I said, I want you to forget how you were taught. And I gave him some books on fabulous maths, and he got like, oh, that's such mind-blowing fabulous maths. I said, you've got to share this feeling with the children. So he would come twice a week for 4 hours, and we'd have an hour of algebra, an hour of geometry, an hour of measurement, and an hour of operations. And the children never heard the word mathematics. So they understand they're doing algebra, or they're, another time they were doing trigonometry, or another time linear equations, simultaneous equations, parabolas, these kind of things. They're just learning the components of maths without ending up with any prejudice about, I can't do maths. So they're all 100% believers that they can do it. And then because he's only coming twice a week, where we think you have to teach maths and English every day because they'll forget it if you're not regular. Like, did you forget what you ate last Christmas? You don't, because it was such a fabulous feast. You can think of everyone who sat round the table. You can remember conversations clear as anything. What Uncle Ernie said then, what Grandma said, It was once in your life that happened. That's learning. So to reinforce it, I let all of these older children be the tutor to younger children so that they could teach what they had learnt.
That's interesting. And Fiona, how about the languages? So it's all in English.
No, it's
No?
not. It's all in the mother tongue. Well, sorry, it's all in a known tongue. The children come from several different linguistic backgrounds, but a lot of intermarriage. So, even families could be bilingual. You might have a mother who spoke Fulfulde and a father who spoke Hausa, and you'd grow up knowing both of them naturally. So Hausa is a lingua franca that actually exists from Sudan through Chad, Nigeria, onwards through Burkina Faso, Mali, all the way to Mauritania on the Atlantic coast, up into Niger. And so it's a language, one of the larger languages of Africa, and local people learn it. So grammatically, they know everything. They know. Grammatically, they know everything. So that's a big plus when you pick up a book and you already know the grammar and the context and the vocabulary. So you can do a lot of, like if you can't read this makaranta as a word, you can't just say makaranta, but you can think, the teacher was waiting for me outside the makaranta. And of course it will be school, won't it? The teacher is waiting for me outside the school. And you can jump in because you're already familiar with the language. You have to learn you have to learn to read in a known language. And you have to learn about the world in a known language so that you can ask a clarifying question and you can wonder aloud without being beaten down and told, no speaking in the vernacular. And this is what we had. This is why we worked with the resurgence of Te Reo Māori, Te Reo Rangatira in Aotearoa, New Zealand, so that people were free to be themselves as students, not as glove puppet versions of themselves. And one of the things that we had in the school certificate syllabus of the 1970s was we would read some Maori books. Some Maori books. Why are we even talking like this? And you'd read Witi Ihimaira. And for Pākehā children reading that, it's all curiosity. Oh, look at that. Sleeping with your nanny, playing cards, googly eyes, staying at a marae. All of this, you're thinking that's something exotic and exceptional, and isn't that interesting? Māori children reading it, it's their first experience of picking up a book where their own life is reflected in it.
Wow.
You have to be 15. At that time, it was your first experience of reading, hey, this character sleeps in their nanny's bed like I do. They didn't know the Pākehā kids don't sleep in their nanny's beds. They didn't know the Pākehā kids in their class are going, ugh, they're sleeping with their grandmother? Ugh. Or that your grandmother's playing cards. My grandmother plays croquet. My grandmother plays golf. My grandmother plays tennis. Your grandmother's got a googly eye and no teeth and you love her anyway? No, mine's got lipstick and a blue rinse in her hair. So when it was good to have that literature component coming in, but we also see like Spiral Collectives was one group that was working to publish books in Māori, and Robin Barge is another one who's done it with Huia Publishers to have literature that you can have from Kohanga Reo upwards. And that reclamation of my right to speak, my right to be heard. Every bird has its own song, and we don't say this bird is a better bird than that one. We recognise that it's all the variety that gives us the dawn chorus and the companion at night and the silence in the middle of the day. So I'm sorry I wandered with my talk.
It's amazing.
I wonder.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So Fiona, can you explain? Can you try to describe visually for us? So what's the tools? What's the classroom in Nigeria?
I don't want to tell you about the government classrooms because they're like something out of Charles Dickens. It's just a rectangular box. It's got 3 photos on the wall of the president, the governor, and the local leader. It's got a blackboard. It may not have chalk. It's got benches and seats that are all welded together. and you'd be lucky if your class is less than 100 squeezed in there for 6 hours of the day. Generally doing things like once upon a time, or photosynthesis may be described as the process by which the energy of the sun is converted into sugars by the chlorophyll in the green parts of leaves. And you have to memorize that, and you don't have a clue what it actually means, but that's what you have to write out. So
do you have much interference of the government on the project? What you guys doing there?
No, because the schools were closed because of the insurgency. And so these children didn't have access to any education. And what we've done has been more efficacious than what schools are doing, what private schools are doing. There was a point where we've recently, had some people say that these children are deprived of education because they're not going to school. And people have come in to look and found, I'd like to send my children here. Because like when we're doing agric, we've got the little agricultural plot, and you can experiment with it, and you can bring the produce and the harvest and the season, and you know it. And when you go out and you draw the different plants, they actually, like our little children can draw the difference between a cucumber plant and a pumpkin plant. Not just on the fruit, but on the leaves, and they're in the same family. They can draw something you can see very clearly. That's maize, and this is a bean, and, and they can draw 50 different plants. And I think, thank God, they know the plants of their own environment, where the children who are going to school are memorizing I wandered lonely as a cloud, or, a host of golden daffodils. They never saw a daffodil. Or under the oak tree, the marigolds and the chrysanthemums, that are nothing to do with their own environment, where our children know the medicine and the food and how to preserve the different things, and what bees like, which is great to be looking after bees. And they're seed savers as well. So if they've enjoyed a particular pepper, they'll make sure that they've saved the seeds so that they can propagate it. If they've enjoyed particular tomatoes, they'll save the seeds. If they've, we had an apple recently, which was a bit of a treat. We've saved the seeds, not having much luck in the desert with apple, but saving the seed and giving it a go. So we have the practical agric, practical home economics, practically everything really. Like there's a map of the world, and the children just refer to it all the time because there's people all over the world supporting them. There was some children in Karori here who sent an iPad, and the journey that iPad made, it had to go to London. From London it went to Grantham, from Grantham it went to Lagos, from Lagos it went to Abuja, Abuja to Kano, from Kano to Maiduguri, to plot that all on a map. Or to think there's a lady in Florida who loves that we're planting mango trees. There's a woman in Istanbul who supports us. There's another lady in Austria who sent us some little toy cars.
Wow.
So they know all these places. And they feel like human as a result of it. They also know that the world is not a tube, which is, when you put the flat rectangle on the wall, New Zealand is off to the west and off to the east on their maps because Africa's in the middle. So there's often two New Zealands, and we can see it folds round. But the world is not a cylinder. They know that it makes a globe, and I mean, just having apps and things. I'm looking for my Google Earth, flipping around on that. So they've also got gadgets and devices that we use to really explore things. Stuff like, there's so many of them want to be doctors because they want to help people. They're not thinking of income. They don't even know what doctors earn, but they know what doctors do, and they know that doctors make a difference. That we had a little app where you put all the organs into the torso of the human body. And the first time they were doing that, where's the pancreas? Where's the gallbladder? And I think it took about half an hour. But they got it down to less than 30 seconds.
Wow.
Putting the bones in. And what was great about doing the anatomy was, of course, they've got all their local names for it. So they had the local name, they had the English common name, but they're also learning clavicle you know, and femur and tibia and ulna and radius, you know, learning that your nose is a proboscis. And so they were learning a lot of Latin and the anatomical terms. So one of the things that they love is like Gray's Anatomy, you know, the really explicit book. And other books where you can lift these plastic pages over and see, you know, here's the skin, and here are the muscles, and here is the circulatory system, and here's the nervous system underneath, and fold it all back down like that. They are seriously aiming to be great doctors.
That's amazing. So Fiona, of course you must have so many stories, but there any specific story, successful story of a kid has somehow left a mark on you?
Huh. I feel like every child has got such wonderful moments in their own life. I can't say a particular one, but this first house was set up in 2015, and there was a little boy, and that phrase, "My husband's heart is like a stone." This little boy, he looked to me like he was about 2 years old, and his face was a stone. Just complete stone. And I thought, oh, I just want to wrap my arms around him and kiss him and hug him, and I want to lift him up, and I want to hold him close, and I want to take him. What am I doing? I have no right to intrude upon his stoniness and expect that he would like my hug and my kiss, you know? Any more than he would like the people around him to hug and kiss him. So that children, you know, like, oh, and I thought, I have no right I don't even know what to feed him. I don't know how to speak to him. You know, like that would just be a gift for me, wouldn't it? It would satisfy me that, oh, I'm doing a good thing. Oh, he was a little boy, his heart was like a stone. So I left him in the community of children, and they hugged and kissed him. You know, they fed him with their own hand. They raised him and loved him and looked after him. And when I would come again, there'd be a little more light and a little more light. And it would be that he can come close and I'm his furniture and he would sit on my lap and we have a lovely time. And then we're parting from each other. And there was this love and affection. But I look at him now that he's 7. And I love the fact that he's grown up in a household of 30 and now it's 55. And his light is alive in him. Mm-hmm. I feel like that was the greatest gift I had, was restraining my own desire to mother and smother a child who was perfectly in the right place, to be with children who had also suffered crisis, who knew exactly how he felt, who could speak what he needed to hear, who would feed him what he needed to eat, who would, you know, they washed him, they dressed him, he was their little mascot, but they didn't baby him at all, and they didn't treat him as anything freakish or unusual, because they had seen plenty of that. And by looking after him, they became themselves as well. So, you know, these are things as well. And I look forward to what they will become. You know, the project with the children's only been going 5 years. The 12-year-olds are 17 and they're about to enter the years where they enter a formal school. They're imagining it's going to be fabulous. And their own teachers are saying to them, don't rush yourself to get there. Do as much as you can at home before you go there. Because the tragedy is less than 20% of the people who spend 12 years in the education system in northern Nigeria, 20% get a qualification and 80% are on the scrap heap. After 12 years at school, it's not good enough. No. So I'm expecting every one of ours who enters school will have a qualification within 3 years. And for those who are not going to get that qualification, we need to get them into business, we need to get them into apprenticeships, we need to find out what their thing is, get them driver's licenses, get them first aid certificates, set them up in other kinds of ways. so that they are going to be independent. And we expect to be with them for life as well. You know, if they want to go, they can go, but we're not going to say, look, you're 18 now, you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, I'm so seriously going to be guarding anyone who's sniffing for marriage around my children. You know, I will be watching to make sure that there's no exploitation of them in marriage in this society.
Mm-hmm. So Fiona, on one of your videos, you said something very, very powerful. Never blame the poor.
Yeah. How can you?
Mm.
You know, when, like, you cannot blame the poor for being poor.
Mm-hmm.
Why did that strike you as so powerful?
Yeah, because I came from a really poor, very poor reality as well, growing up, and I kind of got tired as well for hearing about. It's kind of its poor was a choice. Was something I was choosing to embrace for my life. For the lack of some opportunities. So, for example, I had to think about being honest. The reality of not only myself but the majority of people in my neighborhood was to going to school so we can have at least once food per day, right?
Yeah.
So we were going to the school because of the food, pretty much. And when I heard you saying, don't blame the poor for being poor, because some people say, no, it's just, you're being lazy, or, you just need to believe and you can achieve anything, and all those those stories. It's not that simple as people think, because if you don't have anything to eat, you're already on this race. You're 10 steps behind of everybody else. And when I heard you saying that, I said, yeah, it's so interesting, because we live in a place in New Zealand and it's so blessed, in so many,
Absolutely,
in so many levels, and even, and please don't take me wrong, I'm not saying that the poor here it's less poor than anywhere else, but it's a different reality. We can support more each other here, but in places like Brazil and Nigeria, it's a different scenario.
There's no
right?
social welfare system. There's no social welfare system. There's nothing to catch you. There's no free education. There's no free health. There are situations there now where women know that if they go to a particular NGO, that they can be paid. It's like it's 60,000 naira. It's like, would it be $200 to take a contraceptive injection? So they'll do that, get the money. But that NGO over there will also pay you to take a 6-month contraceptive injection. And that NGO over there will do it as well. So now you've got a whacking great sum of money, but nobody cared about your health, really, did they? Because you've just had 3 times the dose of a contraceptive that you may not even understand what that does to your body. The people who gave it to you don't know what 3 times the dose does to your body. And they paid you to do that. If it's such a great thing, they don't pay you to do it.
Yeah.
If that's such a great thing. I look at the 1% and what the wealthy require as subsidies of the poor. What we require. We require children in Congo to die so that we've got magenta on the screen of our gadget. We don't like that green writing with the black background. We want full colour. We don't want black and white, do we? We want touch screens. And how big do we want our television screens? We need children to die for us. 6 million of them have died in Congo since 1996. We have to hear about some other Holocaust somewhere else where the people actually were richer and had artworks and chandeliers and Stradivarius violins, where the children of Congo. And this is only the second genocide in Congo, so why would we bother yet? We're beneficiaries of it. Mm-hmm. Why would we then blame those very people for subsidizing our life? Trinkets and baubles is what we want in our lives. Convenience. And I have to order my pizza. After all, you know, there's a lot that the poor do. Like there's no plumbing in Nigeria, really. Like there's no water supply that actually functions and works. And a rich man might put a borehole down and pump water into his own tanks, and might be kind enough to put a tap outside his house so that some water can reach some other people who might need water. Mm-hmm. Or they might employ a person to push a barrow that doesn't have any gears and it doesn't have any brakes and it probably doesn't have much air in the tyres and the axles aren't straight and the road's not even. And the man will load that with 1/2 ton of water and push it through the city traffic and carry it 25 litres in the sand and 25 litres in the sand up the flights of stairs to put it in the water tank on top of that man's roof. And he'll be paid 20 cents for each container.
Wow.
Up and down the stairs. I remember being on the 7th floor of a government building where the lifts didn't work. So people didn't really like working in that building because you've got to walk up 7 flights of stairs. So the government had given some spaces to NGOs on the 6th and 7th floor. Mm. And they're happy because they're in a fancy government building which gives them some prestige. But it does mean that all the water for their toilets has to be packed up the stairs. So you'd have the irony of this being a child empowerment project or a safe spaces for children kind of project, and who's bringing the water up the stairs so that they can flush their loo as NGOs. Just a steady stream of children like ants carrying it up.
Wow.
And nobody's seeing it. And then you would blame the children for being in that situation, like you should be at school. But you needed me to carry your water so that you could tell me to be at school. What? You know?
Yeah.
What is that? The irony of things like this. Like when I'm working in a school and I see, this is early on, I see there's no pencils in this school. It would be good if the children had some pencils. Biros are no good because the ink dries out and then we've got a problem. And then we've got a piece of plastic we've got to get rid of in the village where the pencil is no problem, Or we could even go make the handmade ink and just use the blade of grass, straw or something like that and write on wood, which has traditionally been a thing for 1,000 years. But no, we're ultra modern now, so we don't use the wood and the handmade ink and anything eco-friendly and available to the poor. The poor have to rely upon us or it's not really aid. If it's aid, they need to know we're giving it to them. So I reported there's no pencils. They said, what? So they brought a photographer from UK to come to the schools to photograph the fact that there's no pencils. And then they can print, not just put on the website, they can print photos of the school with no pencils so that the stakeholders, who are the people who might give money if you can touch their hearts, you say, there's no pencils in the school. And after 6 months, maybe you've raised enough money to be able to pay off the photographer who flew all the way and stayed in a hotel and paid off the printer who printed it all and paid off the art design who did all the layout of the pamphlet and paid the post office for posting those all out to the stakeholders. Now you've paid all those bills. Oh, look, there's some money. We'll send you a few boxes of pencils. Oh. Like what? And you blame the poor. I've got a really good way to help the poor is buy the pencils. I don't need pencils from England. I don't need someone to come and photograph the children without pencils, being paid £300 a day to take the photo of the child without a pencil, to touch somebody's heart. There's blinking Facebook. You know, I've got friends who can solve that problem just by doing without a cup of coffee a week. So that's what I put as my major mission in registering Lovatt Foundation. My mission was to help people like myself who wanted to know that their money reached. You know, like if they saw a photo and they were moved by it, they just go transfer-wise, send me the money. Tomorrow I can say job is done. That's this is what you're talking about, volunteerism.
Yes.
You feel like, hey, I did a job. A woman approached me. She said, look, I'm turning 50 this year, and I'd like to help 50 people in this, $25 thing. So she started off like, here's $250 for the first 10. And I sent her the photos the next day to show you they're set up. They're in business. And then I sent her photos next week to show, look how their businesses are doing. She sent another 250. She's actually been sending 250, far more. I can't tell you how many people she's helped this year. It was meant to be her 50th birthday celebration that she wanted to help 50 people. And I think she must be up around 150 now.
Wow.
Because she can just see she made a difference.
Where she's from?
She's from Nigeria.
Ah, okay.
But for me, I'm like the halfway house because I'm in the gutter. And like while I can be looking at the stars, I've still got my feet in the sewerage. And not everyone wants to stand there with me.
Yeah. Well, so Fiona, so if someone is listening now and watching this podcast and would like to help you and help what you're doing over there, so what's the best way to do it? That's
why we set up the website. This sounds like an utter plug. It was meant to be inspiring.
No, but it's
but people don't have to do what I'm doing. What we've got to do is
But
find
we
the
can
thing
help
we
you.
can do. Yeah, if they want to join with us or if they want to communicate with me, because part of what I do is help people find their thing. To find what it is you can do.
Yeah.
Like, there's a woman in France who says, I don't have any money. And I say, but you can help a migrant to learn to read. If you're literate, you can do that. And you can even do it on Skype, so you don't even have to go out of the house.
So how that works?
Well, you just start doing things. You like, who needs help learning to read? And you start making... So there's different... Yeah, but if they like to be involved with us at Lovatt Foundation, it's Lovatt, Lovatt. So Lovatt Foundation.
We're gonna leave the link below.
Okay.
Below, it's for sure.
So put the link in, and then there's like a donate button there, and you can find us also on Facebook where I'm more active. Like I have got an email address on the website, but. Really there's about 12 of us who tick over most of these things, and then I take exceptional circumstances, and I'm always I've got school fees to be paying soon for about 12 children. That'd be really nice if people picked up on that. I've got children to clothe, and that becomes expensive. So like if you're thinking of putting shoes on your own children's feet, why not bring the price down a little bit? Send me, I can buy jandals over there for $1.50. It's cheaper than you can get them in New Zealand. Like, if you're putting shoes on your own child, give $1.50 in our direction. And then we can start, helping kids there as well. I don't know. It's like, find your thing. Find the thing you can do. And a really good piece of advice is to give what you love. And I just thank God that there's so many things I love, because it means there's boundless giving. Whether it says gardening, whether it says recycling, whether it's sewage management, whether it says architecture, of letting people feel really confident working with traditional materials rather than thinking I need to move beyond a thatched roof. And I've got a house, I've got a little dwelling that cost me about $50 to build. It's got a thatched roof that I need to replace each year. It's got clay walls, and I need to improve it after every rainy season. And it shows the children I'm living with that we can all house ourselves. If you can house yourself in this day and age, aren't you a rich person already? I despair to see the people who have sold away their future for a mortgage. And I think the cost of accommodation in New Zealand is so crippling. Like, it destroys families, doesn't it? That if a breadwinner or two breadwinners have to be out of the house, from 6:30 until 6:30, or even from 7 until 5, or whatever it is, those long hours don't suit a little preschooler. You've got all this loss of quality of life because you need a walk-in pantry or an ensuite bathroom or a double garage for your car. Some people's houses look like they're half of the house is for your car. I'm so thrilled to see motorbikes, not motorbikes, the little scooters and things that are in Wellington now. I think what a great thing to do if we can get rid of cars. When people have got a $30,000 loan or a $30,000 vehicle, like you've given away a lot of your life right there. And I think we're onto things with decluttering and a whole lot of stuff. Maybe we can talk again sometime.
Yeah.
Like, there is no end to the conversation.
Yes. Yeah, Fiona, I just love so much what you're doing for so many reasons. I think the importance of a teacher and in the fight against ignorance, and the massive changes someone can make in other people's life. And I'm so grateful for the teachers I had in my life, because without them, I don't even know what my life would be. And see what you're doing now give us so much hope for for the world, because more people should engage with the problems of our community. Has that phrase I love a lot. It's when if something it's wrong with our community, it's our responsibility. We need to engage with that. So when we are volunteer and we engage with the problems of our community, we take responsibility for our actions, because we are responsible for everything that's happening around us, right?
Yeah, I remember living in New Zealand and living on a particularly litter-prone road. And it seemed like it's just growing, it's growing. We're not dropping it, but people who drive through our road are dropping litter. And I thought, the litter that's there is an invitation to add more to it. So we'd go out for an evening walk, and I'd have on the back of the pushchair a rubbish bag, and I'm putting rubbish in it and picking it up. And one of the neighbours' children said to me, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "Because this is our road." She said, "Is it your road?" I said, "No, it's our road." "Oh." And she came along and picked up rubbish with me. So now we're a force of two. I've got a baby in a pushchair, and there's the neighbour's child and me picking up rubbish. And what do we find? Then it becomes something that we're all doing. We'll go for an evening stroll and we'll pick up the rubbish. And then there's a day when there's no more rubbish. And then there's a day where there's only one or two pieces and you pick them up. And then there is no more rubbish. And that doesn't take an encyclopedia. That doesn't take, an eat, pray, love kind of moment. It's to think, I don't like living in this dirty area. So I will clean it up. And I think a lot of that, like Wellington Harbour, from when I was a child to what it is now, is just brilliant. You couldn't have eaten from that wharf, and now you can swim from the wharf. The abattoir used to, in the gorge, used to just, the sea would be red in the harbour. It was a filthy place. Evans Bay is full of life in the rock pools that I never saw as a child, and now the water is clear and beautiful, and fabulous. And it's like, this is because people cared. Zealandia, this bird sanctuary, and tuis all over the city, and the native birds are alive. These are improvements I've seen in my lifetime, because we reached a really bad point in the 70s. And I was like, we've got to stop that. And we have. So let's do that worldwide as well, because it is a worldwide village.
Yeah, I love that. So Fiona, 3 most influential books in your life. I know it's a hard question, but yeah, I always, when I have the opportunity to talk to people like yourself, I'm always super curious about because the books are the food for the mind,
Yeah.
So what did you feed your mind all those years to have such a amazing energy, this amazing, this amazing drive to change something. So 3 most influential books of your life.
I think I was really lucky to encounter the biographies of Helen Keller and a woman called June Opie, who I only found out was a New Zealander recently. These two women faced incredible obstacles of disability, Helen Keller being blind, deaf and dumb, and having a teacher who reached through all those layers of disability and brought it to be a gift to the world. And that Helen Keller became a lecturer and wrote this magnificent book and showed us about courage. And I didn't know at the time I'm reading kind of a feminist treatise, but I am. June Opie suffered from TB and she was immobilized in an iron lung for about 3 or 4 years and had a mirror above her where a book could be laid and she could read the 2 pages and then someone could come and turn the page where she could read another 2 pages. And what she had to do, immobilized for 2 years in this iron lung that's keeping her oxygenated. These were stories of women who faced disabilities, and I had no disability in my life. So I'm sure that affected me. And then things that have, like more recently, I got to, like around 2004, I got to read the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Islam. These stories like he wasn't kind of a Robin Hood character. He really, like, these things he said, and they're authentic, and they're verified, and they've been triangulated amongst the witnesses, and there's little gems of truth, like you should lift the obstacle out of the path of your brother. If you can't do anything else, lift obstacles out of the path of your brother. If all you have is a date, give half. Gentle things. It's better for you to pick up sticks off the ground and sell them as firewood than to beg. That you shouldn't go to sleep with money. You should make sure your neighbours, 40 houses in every direction, have what they need before you go to sleep. I remember reading that once and thinking, oh my God, my pantry's full and I'm living in South Auckland and I've heard that baby crying in that house and I've heard shouting from that house and I know there's suffering in that house and my pantry's full. I just packed it in a box and took it. And these were some of the early things that I was doing to kind of like free myself from this. You know, when you're born into privilege, and I'm speaking to you as if you're born into privilege and you're not. Privilege is knowing there's something for breakfast. That's privilege. So you can be thinking that's normal. But normal for privilege is actually selfish. And I'm really grateful that I grew up in a house where my mother would go out and she'd come back with somebody else to sit at our table. Or if we came home with a friend from school, she'd say, are you staying for dinner? You know? And our house was open to all sorts of people joining us at the table or staying with us as they needed to, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And I thought we were actually poor anyway, because it's part of what privilege is. Is you see people who are better off than you, rather than people who are less well off than you.
Wow, that's beautiful. So Fiona, if you could, give one message to someone who is listening to that and inspired by your story and would like to become a volunteer as well. So what's your message to them?
I said, give what you love. And I think it's also a good opportunity to conquer a fear. Don't allow yourself to be afraid of being engaged in something. This was another thing that my mother did, was it would get to school holidays. I'm 13. She'd say, you're not sitting around the house these holidays. And she'd arrange something for me, like take me off to the IHC workshop and leave me with people who have got spina bifida and Down syndrome and things that I hadn't encountered. And I'm there for 8 hours a day before she comes and picks me up again. And that's like, by the end of 2 weeks, I actually know a whole lot of human beings now that I wouldn't have otherwise encountered.
Beautiful.
You know, she'd take me off to an old people's home and say, go and talk to them. You know, I'm like, what, I have to find my way? I'm like 13, 14, I don't want to be doing this. So she already put me in deep water. And you just, like when your heart is unleashed, it just becomes so easy. I'll give you an example here. I had a house already with 49 children in it, and I heard there's a family of 6 who just lost their mother. Their father died a month ago, and now they've lost their mother. There are 6 children. And we found a place where the 2 younger ones, they can go one way, and that 2-year-old can go another way. Can you take the older 4? And I said, look, all an orphan has is their siblings. I'll take all 6, or I'm not taking any. I thought, how can I even say that? I'm not a wealthy woman. Like, my income's about $8,000 a year, personally. How can I say, give me all 6, or I'm not taking any? And they put all 6 in our house, and it was just the most joyous thing. And I don't even have to think twice. I don't even have to think twice. The earth is still pushing up vegetables. We're still eating them.
That's amazing. So Fiona, thank you so much for
Thank
your time.
you.
Thank
Oh,
you for
how wonderful.
what you've been doing. It's amazing. You know, I'm gonna watch that really close, and I'm gonna try to, of course, help as much as I can. And please just keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. That's amazing.